Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Laura Prada from the Telesur Studios in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Centrist parties across the European Union have suffered heavily in the Black's parliamentary elections, with the far-right and Green parties making major gains. As voter turnout increases to vote over 50% across the European Union, the far-right are set to take 74 seats, up from 37, while the Green Alliance is set to increase its number of seats from 50 to 75. The right-wing European People's Party group is said to have the most representative, but still recorded significant losses, dropping from 221 to 165. There has been a lukewarm response to its proposed candidate for the presidency of the European Union Commission, German MEP Manfred Weber. And we go to Iran, where the foreign minister Mohammad Javad Zarif said Tehran is ready to defend itself against any military and economic aggression. Holding a joint news conference with his Iraqi counterpart in Baghdad, Zarif called on Europe to help preserve the nuclear deal, which is being undermined by the United States. The senior Iranian diplomat also said that his country wants to develop normal relations with its Arab neighbors in the Gulf. Meanwhile, the Iraqi foreign minister Mohammad Ali al-Hakim backed Iran, saying that the United States' blockade on the country isn't conducive to peace in the region.
We will defend ourselves against any efforts for a war against Iran, whether it's a military or an economic one that would victimize the Iranian people, and we will face it with strength and resistance. The Islamic Republic of Iran has presented several suggestions for dialogue and cooperation with the countries of the region, and one of these suggestions is signing a non-aggression pact with the neighboring countries, and this suggestion remains on the table.
We are clearly saying that we are against the unilateral measures taken by the U.S. We are completely against these distractions and orders given to our neighbor Iran. We are standing by neighboring Iran and its position, and God willing, we can play an intermediary role between the parties if asked from Iraq.
And protest leaders in Sudan are seeking to force the ruling military council to transfer power to civilian rule by issuing a call for a two-day strike this week. The strike is set to take place on Tuesday and Wednesday. The Sudanese Professional Association has threatened civil disobedience if the military council does not hand power over to the civilian authority. The association previously led protest actions that saw the army oust President Omar al-Bashir last month.
Allah willing, on Tuesday and Wednesday, all the Sudanese people will be on strike, and all will be protesting until their demands are met by establishing a full civil state. The military council must hand over power to a civilian-led authority. This is the aim of the revolution. Martyrs have sacrificed their lives for this goal. Leadership belongs to the people. The military council doesn't have legitimacy. They took power in order to protect the Sudanese people, and the Sudanese people will forever demand a full civilian-led authority.
Meanwhile, the head of Sudan's ruling military council met Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince on Sunday, who expressed the United Arab Emirates' support for Sudan following the call of former president. It is the head of Sudan's military council, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan's first trip abroad since the army overthrew Bashir last month after mass protests against his rule. Al-Burhan's visit to the United Arab Emirates come as part of a trip to Egypt and Saudi Arabia. Analysts say the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt are trying to consolidate their influence in Sudan after Bashir was toppled and arrested on April 11th following 3 decades as president. And we talk about Venezuela because a government delegation has traveled to Oslo, Norway, for a new round of talks with representatives of the country's opposition. Preliminary talks began earlier this month with each of the two sides holding discussions with Norwegian officials. President Nicolás Maduro held a send-off meeting with senior government officials late Saturday.
We're here reading the official statement released by the government of Norway. We're meeting to prepare because our delegation, the delegation of the Bolivarian government and revolutionary forces of Venezuela, are leaving for Venezuela to continue dialogue, to continue the conversations, to search for peace, always to search for peace, peace and dialogue for our country. Jorge Rodriguez will preside over the delegation, and along with Hector Rodriguez and Jorge Arreaza, will compose a good delegation that will bring the voice of Venezuela. I'd like to thank the government of Venezuela for all of their efforts to continue to provide this second step, ready to work on this integral agenda we have already agreed upon and move forward.
And delegations from all over the world went to South Africa to attend the inauguration of President Cyril Ramaphosa this Saturday. Among the foreign delegates and representing the Bolivarian government on behalf of President Nicolás Maduro was Minister Aristóbulo Isturris. The Social and Territorial Development Minister delivered greetings to Ramaphosa and the people of South Africa. He later received an enthusiastic welcome during an assembly of the Communist Party of South Africa, held in solidarity with the people of Cuba and Venezuela. And also the Vice President of Cuba took part in the numerous activities surrounding the swearing-in ceremony. Vice President Salvador Valdez Mesa has been in the country since the 23rd and head of the Cuban delegations, which included representatives of the Cuba's Revolutionary Armed Forces and other officials. The Vice President met with the Chief of South Africa's Defense Forces, and during the visit he also paid tribute to the Cuban internationalist fighters who lost their life during the struggle for Africa's liberation and the struggle to end apartheid. And the inauguration ceremony took place in Pretoria following Cyril Ramaphosa's May 8th election win. The president said that he is committed to tackling the country's challenges during his new mandate and said there shall no longer be any person who is unable to meet their basic needs.
Today, we declare that our progress as South Africa in all our endeavors depends on and cannot be separated from the onward march of our beloved continent, Africa.
And President Cyril Ramaphosa will announce his cabinet later this week. Over the past few weeks, there has been speculations about who will he choose as his ministers, especially for those posts of deputy president. Reports indicate that David Masuba will not return as Ramaphosa's second in command. Like this, we come to a first break here from the South. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Telesur English and on my account at Laura Pitlister. Stay with us. And we are back and we go to Argentina, where former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner held her first vice presidential campaign rally on Saturday. ahead of this year's October elections. Presidential candidate and former cabinet chief Alberto Fernández shared the stage in the town of Merlo in Buenos Aires province. Fernández de Kirchner announced her candidacy last weekend, and the ticket is expected to attract support from social movement and trade unions organizations amid the working class growing resentment of President Mauricio Macri's neoliberal policies.
I want to tell you not to expect that two leaders can do everything. I believe that we, together, will also demand a meeting, and also, as I have been saying for a long time, a social contract that allows us to understand that there are no individual triumphs, no individual achievements if the realization of a society is not collective.
We were able to eliminate Argentina's external debt without making any Argentine suffer the cost of getting out of that debt.
And now we go to Brazil, where shows of support for far-right President Jair Bolsonaro and his neoliberal reforms took place in cities around the country. Brian Muir from Sao Paulo, our correspondent, has this story for us on the following report. Let's see it. Welcome.
In dozens of cities across Brazil, tens of thousands of right-wing protesters came out today in support of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro and his ultra-neoliberal austerity reforms. Now, this was meant to be a response to the historic student and teacher strike that took place on May 15th, which brought millions of people to the streets in all 26 states. But as the right started infighting and as key allies of Bolsonaro started stepping out and saying they weren't going, the crowd expectations shrunk and shrunk to the point where in Brasilia, the national capital, there were only a few thousand people out there. And as a result of this underwhelming show of support for the beleaguered president, a group of senators announced this evening that they're going to start investigating ways to pass a constitutional amendment to remove the president from office without an impeachment.
Thank you, Brian. And we continue talking about Brazil movement. Free Lula and Workers' Party has kicked off a nationwide campaign to raise the issue of lawfare against former President Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, who has been held as political prisoner since April 2018. Lula remains in prison facing charges for a case in which he was allegedly given a luxury apartment by the Odebrecht construction company in exchange for a contract with the state-owned oil company Petrobras. Lula and the Workers' Party deny those charges. And Lula is condemned the actions of Judge Sergio Moro, who jailed him, thereby paving the way for Jair Bolsonaro's election victory. In an interview, Lula said it was all a plot to prevent him from taking part in the 2018 presidential elections. Judge Moro, who led the corruption investigation that led to Lula's imprisonment, has been appointed as Justice Minister. Earlier this month, the American Association of Jurists categorized Lula as a political prisoner, saying his sentencing was a consequence of an accusation produced by violating due process of law that prejudiced Lula's right to a defense and without evidence. And Guyana, in the Caribbean, is celebrating its 53th anniversary of independence from British colonial rule under the theme, "A United Guyanese Are We at 53." For the occasion, CARICOM commended Guyana's significant contribution to the global fight against climate change through the preservation of its forests. The island, which is home to CARICOM's headquarters, has also played an important part in the regional integration movement. Guyana is the third smallest independent state and the only English-speaking country on the mainland of South America. And we talk about CARICOM, which is facing economic challenges after international monetary institutions cut ties with banks that would have enabled cross-border payments. CARICOM chairman Timothy Harris said the practice has a harmful effect on money transfers from the large Caribbean diaspora to their families back home. He said commercial trade payments are also negatively affected for businesses, and overnight bank wire transfer of funds from the U.S. now takes as long as 3 months or more for delivery. The CARICOM chairman says global banks were also offering their services at unconscionable high rates. In El Salvador, FMLN Youth Wing spent Sunday voting in internal elections to select the leadership of its National Youth Secretariat for the next 5 years. 2,000 young Salvadorians participated, with the winner being Yasael Torres, who said he takes on the responsibility knowing that it won't be an easy task. But he said there is one clear winner. That's the FMLN, which will continue in the footsteps of the Marxist and Leninist revolutionary and campesino fighter Farabundo Martí.
I know that it won't be an easy task, and that's why, walking out through those doors and coming out of this process, we must be more united, because the battles to come will only be won if we are together. The enemy is not in our home. The enemy is outside.
In Guatemala, a funeral has been held for a 2.5-year-old migrant boy who died after being detained at the U.S.-Mexico border. The funeral for Wilmer Josue Ramirez, who died of pneumonia in a hospital earlier this May, was held in his hometown of Olopa. According to a U.S. border official, the boy's mother told officers her son was ill 3 days after the family crossed the border. So far, 6 children have died in U.S. custody since December, drawing greater criticism of U.S. President Donald Trump's hardline stance on illegal migration. And the inaugural edition of the Festival of Latin American Women in Arts took place in London last Sunday, with an estimated 2,000 people attending. Our correspondent Pablo Navarrete has this story for us. Welcome.
On Sunday in London, the first edition of Flower, the Festival of Latin American Women in the Arts, came to a close. This new festival was set up to provide a new exhibition space for Latin American women in the field of music, film, literature and art. Over 4 days, this new event on the cultural circuit shone a light on Latina culture in London, a city of more than 8 million inhabitants, where it is estimated that more than 113,000 Latin Americans live.
What we want is to create new spaces for the Latin American diaspora in London, and possibly the United Kingdom, and to get away from the stereotypes that we've always had put on us. So it's that, creating a new space.
46 Latin American women artists took part in the festival, with most of them living in London. However, Flower also had 3 international artists from Brazil, Cuba and Venezuela. At the festival's opening event at the Rich Mix Cultural Centre located in East London, there was a literary workshop and a music concert headlined by Caramba, a group based in Barcelona but comprised of several Latin American women. The London-based Bolivian musician Paxi Coca from the Andean group Locandes also performed a special show at the festival.
Any event that aims to highlight the arts, especially one featuring women, is very important. I think we are living in the time when the feminine side is rising, and it's very important. This is the first version of the festival. There is a lot of expectation.
During the 4 days of the festival, an estimated 2,000 people attended the 16 events put on by Flower. It is now hoped that the festival will return next year, so that Londoners can once again be offered a chance to savour the talent of Latin American women. Pablo Navarrete, Telesur, London.
Like this, we make a second and very short break. Stay tuned. we are back. At least one person is dead and several injured after a powerful 8-magnitude earthquake shook Peru's Amazon region early this Sunday. Peru's National Emergency Operations Center reported the death of a man from the Cajamarca region after a boulder struck his home. More than 50 homes were destroyed, and the quake could be felt as far as Colombia, Brazil, and Venezuela. And at least 4 people have died in 3 explosions in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. 7 other people were injured in the blast, and police say they suspect the attacks may have been carried out by a Maoist splinter group opposed to the government for arresting its supporters.
When I reached here, I could feel that there was something seriously wrong, and I felt I needed to help. I saw people were crying in agony and pain. One person had died, and his body was torn into small pieces.
A no candidate has pushed themselves forward for Algeria's presidential election scheduled for July the 4th. Despite the military saying a vote is the best way out to the country's political situation, protesters have rejected the planned vote as illegitimate under authorities which remain linked to former President Abdelaziz Bouteflika. The deadline for a candidate to present himself passed midnight, May 25th. Bouteflika left the presidency in April, but massive protests demanding reform in the country have continued. And we finish in Africa, where Mozambique's urban areas and countryside were both greatly affected by Cyclone Idai. But it is precisely in those areas where the solidarity of Brazilian campesinos towards their Mozambican brothers is most evident. Our correspondent and special envoy, Eduardo Andre Vieira, has more on the following story.
This community, located in Mozambique's central area, is still recovering from the consequences of Cyclone Idai, which hit on March 14. In addition to winds of more than 200 kilometers per hour, the Buzi River flooded lowest set regions 2 days after the cyclone hit. Amindo and his family had to stay on top of a tree for 3 days in order to survive.
We were dragged by the water when we were already on the roof of our house. We ended up almost in the middle of the Buzi River, and we were there for 3 days. On Monday, a man who had a canoe finally managed to rescue us.
2 months have passed since Cyclone Idai hit communities like Hamamba, located in the province of Sofala, remain without power. Here, rural workers have also lost all their crops after the disaster. Mozambique has almost 28 million citizens, with 60% of them living in rural areas. This is a place where people depend on food grown in their communities for survival.
After the rains, the winds came. The cyclone began to destroy houses. The fields were flooded in lower areas, and all crops were damaged by the water.
Another difficulty is access to clean water, which is stored in tanks. There is also an epidemic of malaria in this region. To provide aid, the Brazilian Landless Workers Movement and the Adecro de Mozambique organization founded the October 14th Brigade to help in health, education, agriculture, construction, among other things. For them, this is about working alongside the Mozambican people.
What I want to know is how they work here, as it is a chance to have a completely new experience.
International solidarity is very important, but the main element for the reconstruction of Mozambique lays somewhere else.
We are people who will always fight. We have always fought in wars and for lands. That's why we overcome. We are very strong.
It is in Sofala where the ties between Brazil and Mozambique are being further strengthened.
Like this, we come to the end of this brief, but you can find this and much more other stories on our website, telesurenglish.net, where, of course, you can read opinion article or watch our special interviews as you are seeing on our screen. Continue with Telesur, connecting the global south. Until next time, thank you for watching.